Thank you very much for this very interesting talk. Now we open the discussion. So everybody is welcome here present and also online to formulate questions. Please, those who are online are encouraged to formulate the questions through chat room. Don't hesitate to, to ask questions. We can read them for the presenter. And now I open the discussion.
Thank you so much for the valuable chance. And I'm Audrey from another researcher. Louder. Yeah, we have a question like thank you so much again. And we know that I want to know how much the linguistic diversity from all the priests and the missionary in the past will bring to the real mainstream of the controversial of the righteous, with controversial of the rites. We know that my missionary migrants speak perhaps like in our Chinese all kinds of archives. It speaks a fluent Fujianese, and according to some other resources, it makes us it's dialogue instead of saying the Mandarin, and picks up some like emperor in Beijing, and there is some other like controversial towards this kinds of issue, and I want to know like the professor's idea about language diversity, or like which kind of dialects in China will bring up. And so like how do you evaluate the language diversity of those missionaries? Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Language diversity is not something I'm really an authority on. I don't know that there wasn't a single language across China at that time as happened in the 20th century. But I don't think Ricci, for example, Ricci lived first in Xuheng, then in Nanking, and then in Peking, and he didn't seem to have any problem with language diversity. And I'd love if somebody does somebody else know more about this subject than I do, because I'm not sure to what extent language diversity was a problem. I do know that Valeriano, when he came to Macau, didn't like what he saw, because he saw Macanese new Christians, Chinese Christians, being turned into Europeans, Portuguese-speaking Europeans, wearing a collar and tie or whatever was the equivalent at that time, and he wanted them to remain Chinese-speaking and continuing with Chinese culture, and he wanted the faith to be brought into the culture and to transform the culture from within, rather than to be imposed as something foreign. But I'm not sure if I can say anything beyond that very, very coherent about language diversity. Can anybody else speak to it?
So different from Mandarin. So according to some archives, sorry for my pronunciation. English is better. It's Magros.
Negro.
Magro.
Louder, please.
Magro speak only Fujianese. This is according to some archives. That's why when emperor asked him, like, it's the words, and the Macro says I cannot, and emperor was so angry about him. So that's why like dispel some other writers. So the only way is I do not know like how much impact does they bring. If it is like only belong to language diversity and around some like controversial, that's interesting. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. My question pertains to figuratism. It's not something I'm very familiar with. In fact, I was only more systematically exposed to it last month when we had our first session of the Catholic Studies Forum for young Chinese scholars. And one of the scholars spoke about the Jesuit revisioning of Taoism through the prism of figurism. So, and his presentation was trying to see how Taoism in its quasi-metaphysical theory could be perceived as that kind of a hidden, as you said, antediluvial metaphysical reading of the world, that sort of a archaic knowledge that Taoism contains and all that. But my question then brings me straight back to St. Paul at Athens when he said, introducing Christ as the unknown God and all that. Could Figurism, Jesuit Figurism in China be slightly interpreted or cast in a much more favorable, positive light following what Paul did in Athens? I always thought that the reason they picked St. Paul as the name for the college in St. Paul is precisely this, that they came not to a primitive jungle in China, but they came to a civilized world on par with Athens. So that would be my question. Second, in observation, as recently Newman been proclaimed a doctor, Newman back in 1830, when he was 29, wrote a rather striking line which was never really propagated or made known. He said back then, I believed in a universal revelation. And one can draw multiple implications from that line, and even could accuse him of figurism of sorts when he classified the world as the pre-Christian, post-Christian dispensation and all that. But hey, if he could be made doctor of the church, maybe we can draw some Newmanian insight to sort of ameliorate what figurism lacks or lacks behind. So that's just not a question and observation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent.
Yeah, actually, I have some material in the book about St. Paul at Athens, because I think it's very interesting. Paul at Athens actually provides a kind of biblical precedent for accommodationism, in the sense that Paul went into this very sophisticated place and was perhaps a bit intimidated by it, but he began by speaking to the existing conceptions of the Athenians. And there is that, in general, missionaries have to do that, I think. They have to find out, do these people have conceptions of the spiritual world? Do they have an idea of heaven and hell, of a creator? They have to try and find the kind of language they need to use to communicate the message. And St. Paul at Athens is certainly, it is the biblical precedent for that. And he even almost pretended that the God he was coming to speak to them about was the unknown God that they had already worshipped. He's not. I don't think he's to be taken literally in that. He's using it as his introduction to the message. But it's even though it's a biblical precedent, I think it's a highly qualified one, because Paul himself left Athens, and immediately in Acts 18:1, immediately after Athens, he went straight to Corinth. And later, he told the Corinthians what he was going through sort of emotionally when he arrived among them first. He said, and it seems to indicate that he was not actually happy with what he had done at Athens. He said, when I came among you, brethren, he said, I was determined not to give you any of the wisdom of this world or the wisdom of men, but to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And it's very tempting, as I say in the book, to see, sorry? Oh, right, yeah. Yes, it's very tempting to see St. Paul as a Jesuit in Athens and a Corinthian, a Dominican in Corinth. I mean, I agree with you, yeah. Paul at Athens does provide a precedent, but I think if you look at the context, I think it's qualified. Yeah, it's not entirely unambiguous. Yeah, Newman, I was never really an authority. Like, I've never studied Newman very closely, so I'm not sure. I think that if somebody else can speak to that one, yeah.
Thank you very much for this comment. Any other care? Yes, please, Joseph.
And the Figurists claim that some Chinese ancient texts contain some divine truth. And actually, what did these Figurists actually referring to? I mean, which Chinese ancient texts were they actually referring to when they claim that these texts contain some divine truths?
I don't have a comprehensive knowledge of that, but one thing was that they had knowledge of a flood, and that humanity began by being wiped out with the flood, and then reconstituted with one family who became, one man, Noah, or Fusi as the texts called him, who became the new first parent of subsequent generations. Some other things, some of the ethical practices recommended by Confucius can be accepted as consistent with Christianity. They also had the belief in a single God, and there was a long line of emperors who worshipped the single God and held rites and offered sacrifices every year to the one God, the God of heaven, who later became, in Catholic practice, the Tianju, the Lord of Heaven, which is an ancient Chinese expression in those texts, became the name for the God that we worship. There are lots of other. I wish I could give you a more complete answer to that.
In terms of the 30s, the previous, they accept the pan-theism. How could you say it? This pan-religion topic. But I'm just wondering whether there's some internal relationship between Freemasonry and Chinese right controversy. I mean, did those people, they know this controversy happened in China, or it's just they read it in Europe with a different source and so on? Yeah, thank you.
That's a very good question. I would like, if I had enough time, I would like to have gone into that question more. They certainly did. Europe's Enlightenment were following the China rights controversy like a bunch of hawks. They were watching everything. They really were, and particularly when they heard that China had at that time such a unified, cohesive society under the emperor and under the more local, the magistrates and the literati, the authorities, and the respect for ancestors. They had this unified, cohesive, civilized, orderly society without any church. Where are the bishops and priests? They said, so it set them thinking. It was a big influence on the Enlightenment, because these guys, where they sat on the Enlightenment, they sat in their salons and drank their coffees and sneered at the church. They were asking all the time, China can be that good without a church. Why does Europe need a church? Yeah, absolutely. They were onto that. They were very aware of that. Yeah, very. I don't know if you'd call it an internal relationship, but they were watching it from the outside, and they were very influenced by it. Yeah, very. Yeah. Oh, it's very difficult to do that, because Freemasonry is strictly secretive. It's not. They don't show their hand. Yeah, it's a bit difficult. Yeah. Sorry.
Who knows if it was not Cardinal Richelieu, a Jesuit in Europe, who could be one of the protagonists of the debate of pan-religious, but this is my speculation. The last question is here from the online participants. It was formulated in Chinese, we translated into English. The rights controversy has lasted for nearly years. As a Catholic, how do I understand the actual significance of this controversy? So actually, maybe briefly in few sentences, could you, because this was not the end of the controversy. Actually, in 38, in the 30s, the Vatican actually took very clear position, right? So I think it's good also to conclude what is the final position of the Vatican about this matter.
Yeah, the final position of the Vatican is a bit difficult, because that, like the controversy itself, it's gone. The pendulum has gone one way and then the other. There was very clear. Pope Leo XIII issued very clear teaching against Freemasonry and against Pan-Religionism. So did Pope Pius XI. in Mortalium Animos, where he was very opposed to interreligious gatherings. And Pope Pius XII, not so much, but in the modern, in Vatican II and beyond, the pendulum went back, and I think pan-religionism now has a position in the church that I personally don't think it should have, because I think it's spiritually toxic. It exposes people to spiritual influence, to basically sinister spiritual influence. And if you want my opinion on what the significance is, it's beware of pan-religionism and exposing yourself to sinister spiritual influence. Yeah. That's my position on it. Yeah. And I know an awful lot of people wouldn't agree. I would say 10 or 15 years ago, my position would have been countercultural. It would have been very much against the mainstream. More recently, I don't think so. I think with this experience of exorcists and how sinister spiritual influence and power can actually affect people and the damage it can do, I think there's probably a new awareness that maybe Pope Pius XIII got it right, actually, after all. Yeah.
Yes, this is the side of the pan-religionism on the issue of Freemasonry. But eventually, at the beginning of 20th century, Vatican issued a document, short document, actually half a page, a letter written to one of the archbishops in Beijing, clearly stating that the Vatican is in the position of allowing the practice of the rights controversy by lay people, right? So it was resolved and actually forbidding. When I read the original document, it mentions we forbid any further discussion about this topic, not to cause any more stir and turbulence. So actually, Vatican wanted to officially to end this kind of, in a sense, not very much helpful debate about that. Yeah. So thank you very much for your wonderful talk and the discussion. Thank you very much for your questions and participation. Wishing you all the best, and hopefully we can meet in the future as well. You are encouraged to take some journals that we put outside, free of charge. And now everybody is invited to have a little snack downstairs in the lobby to have a break for those who are continuing their wonderful classes with Professor Law. And so downstairs, when you go down to the lobby, there will be some drinks and snacks. Thank you very much. Please give a hand to the... Thank you very much.